Hello and welcome everyone to today's Esho Genesis R&D webinar. We appreciate your attendance. My name is Chris and I'll be joined by my colleague Alicia. Today we'll be sharing the latest developments in the Genesis R&D software, update version 11.10. This update has been available to cloud and on-premise users for a little while. If you're not running version 11.10 or have any questions about your license or account, please get in touch with the Esho sales team. You can reach them at sales@esho.com and they can help you. Before we get into the main topic, let me give you a little background on Esho real quick. Esho was established in 1981 and has grown from offering one of the first nutrition and labeling software solutions to a full suite of products and services that include our Genesis R&D Foods, Genesis R&D Supplements, the food processor for dietary analysis, and our consulting services that provide labeling services, formula review, and expertise for customized projects. Genesis R&D was introduced in 1991 to help address the need for convenient formulation analysis and formatting the NLEA food labels for US regulations. Over the years, Genesis has remained a go-to standard for product development, recipe analysis, and nutrition facts creation, as well as now restaurant menu analysis and reporting. We offer label modules to prepare compliant labels for the US, Canada, Mexico, and EU. Today we'll be demonstrating Genesis Foods version 11.10. With the last webinar, we wrapped up a 4-part series of Genesis R&D 101, covering the fundamentals of working with Genesis. In June, we'll be covering serving sizes, discussing reference amounts, as well as working with labels in Genesis. Throughout the year, we will include additional topics. You can find these as well as previously recorded webinars on the Esho website under the Events tab. As always, this webinar will be recorded and you will receive a link to the recording and the slide deck for it as well. And even if you have to leave early or for those that didn't attend, they will still receive that to all people that signed up. Please note, if you have any questions, send those in the right way via the GoToWebinar control panel. Don't wait until the end. We have colleagues standing by to actually help respond to your questions during the webinar. If we don't happen to get to your question during the webinar, we'll follow up with you directly afterwards. Today, we're going to cover changes to the user face in the edit label settings. We'll show you additional labels that were recently added for the Canadian labeling module, share a little bit about the Genesis API, and we'll end with Q&A questions. So we'll take questions that are presented, and if multiple people are asking for them, we'll cover them at the end. With that, I will now turn it over to my colleague, Alicia.
Thank you, Chris. During today's webinar, we are pleased to show you the latest developments in the Genesis R&D Foods software. As Chris mentioned, we have some UI updates that we hope you will find most helpful, and we've added more of the allowed Canadian label format options to the software. If you have the Canadian labeling module, you will see those newly added label options available in version 11.10. If you do not have the Canadian labeling module and you do need to produce labels for Canada, please get a hold of our sales team and they can provide you with more detail and pricing for adding that module. So when working with Genesis 11.10 and with the edit label settings in Genesis, you can choose the country regulations, the styles, and other options. In version 11.10, some of the edit label settings in the General tab were renamed. So you can see the comparison here between version 11.9 and version 11.10. This appears in all the modules, not just Canadian settings, but all the label modules in the Edit Label settings. In Genesis, as you move from one country to another, you'll see different format styles as Genesis adjusts the appropriate regulation. Navigating within the Edit Label settings, you'll see several areas to make selections, and most of these primary descriptions have been renamed. As the number of labeling modules has increased over the years, we needed to apply some more common terms that would make sense in describing these options. So we have the country authority area that was previously referred to as regulation. From here, you'll select the country or the authority that you'll use to create your labels. For Genesis, we offer, again, the labeling modules for US, Canada, Mexico, and the EU. So depending on your license and the label modules you subscribe to, some or all of the country authority options may be accessible, and that will be indicated in black text. If you see any in gray and need to access those, again, contact the Esho sales team to discuss your license. And then we have the regulation area, which was previously referred to as category. For countries that have introduced new regulations in relatively recent years, you'll see options to select either the new regulation or the old regulation. For instance, the US shows 1990 and 2016 options. Canada has 2003 and 2016. Mexico shows 2010 and 2020. And for the EU, we have one regulation set, so there's no drop-down option there. But in general, you would select the most recent set of the regulations. Next, you'll see the recommendation profile, which was previously called label. For the US and Canada, you can create labels for specific age groups like adults, children, and infants. So by selecting the recommendation profile, the label adjusts to display the appropriate nutrients, adjust daily values, and other pieces of information that are required for that particular age group that you've chosen. Next is the style area. That experienced no change in the name, but we have relocated a couple of the label formats. So in the style area, you select the label style based on perhaps your product or available packaging size. And then the dual column label formats for the US, Canada, and Mexico were previously listed in the format section, but they've been relocated to the style area. And lastly, we have the display area, previously called format. And for products sold in the US and Canada, you have the option to display either a full or a simplified label. The full option typically displays all of the mandatory nutrients or more if you choose. The simplified option generally gives you a scaled back label, automatically omitting nutrients that occur in insignificant amounts in an effort to reduce visual clutter for consumers. The display type section lets you select from those type of options. So we hope those changes are easy to adapt to and that they make good sense going forward. To address the changes specifically for the Canadian module, Canada offers a wide variety of options on how the nutrition facts table can be formatted. The labels added to Genesis 1110 are not new to Canada regulation, but they were added to accommodate additional packaging sizes and display options. So for that, I wanted to share this reference information from the CFIA website as a reminder of how to choose the label format for Canada. On this website, you'll find steps and decision trees to help ensure you're working with the best label for your product. So this slide shows you the table, which nutrition facts table family should I use reference, and has a link to that site. In Genesis 1110, we've added the following formats to the Genesis or to the labeling module for Canada. You'll see the standard narrow label format and simplified single serving prepackaged products labels that provide standard vertical, tabular, and linear styles for that. So the Canadian standard narrow format is an option to accommodate smaller packages and perhaps narrower shaped packages. You can choose from adult, child, or infant recommendation profiles, and the Canadian Standard Narrow label is reported in one language since this is a space-saving type of format. I'll show you that in the software in just a few minutes. The Simplified Single Serving Prepackaged Products label is designed specifically for single serving prepackaged products, like it says. These might typically have limited nutritional value and might be something like a snack food, so where nutritional information can be a bit limited, and that label, due to packaging size, would need to be a little bit smaller. This format doesn't apply to single serving prepackaged meals. And since the single-serving prepackaged products may face challenges in reporting all required information due to space limitations, certain nutrients and the insignificant footnote can be omitted from this label. Prepackaged products must meet the single-serving criteria to use this format, which is to say that the package contains less than 2% of the reference amount for that food, or the quantity of the food in the package can reasonably be consumed by one person at a single eating occasion. The label must display minimum required nutrients of calories, fat, carbohydrates, and protein. And in addition, saturated fat, trans fat, sugar, or sodium, if those occur at greater than 0, then those must be listed. If a claim is made about a nutrient, just in general, you need to provide nutrient information within the label. So on this label, even if you're using the simplified format but making a claim on your product, then you do need to display the nutrient on which the claim is made. Things like sugar, alcohol, and most vitamins and minerals that are specifically added to a product must be declared. So again, you use the simplified label, but these types of nutrients are occurring in the product intentionally added, then those must be declared on the label. And there is a way to adjust this label to manually select those. This label is bilingual for the vertical and the tabular formats, and it's unilingual for the linear format. So to accommodate the required and the allowed reporting on the single-serving prepackaged products label, Genesis automatically applies specific settings to this label. The simplified label is set to bilingual, like I said, for the vertical and the tabular styles per the regulations. So when working in Genesis, there's in the edit label feature a show bilingual option in general for working with Canada labels. But because of the requirements for this label, if you check or uncheck the show bilingual setting, that doesn't have an effect on this particular label. For the additional nutrients, again, saturated fat, trans fat, sugar, and sodium, if the value is greater than insignificant, then those nutrients automatically show on the label. And for those nutrients, if the values are 0, by default, the label will omit those. Again, however, you can manually adjust the displays for those nutrients. One example, again, is if you're making a claim, like for cholesterol. Make a claim of cholesterol on your product packaging, then you want to show cholesterol in the label itself. And so there's a way to select that within Genesis. And again, the insignificant footnote does not appear on this label. In addition to those specific settings for Canada labels, the 1110 offers general settings for Canadian labels. So those include the standard simplified Canadian label can also display insignificant nutrients if desired. So you would need to manually select those if you want those displayed on the label. And then again, tabular labels will show a bilingual label. The linear label will show as a unilingual label, so just showing French or English. So at this time, let me move into Genesis and show you how those features look in action. So I'll just open a recipe. We have kind of a simple one to show you. It's an applesauce recipe, and I'm going to view my label. And when I do so, my software is set to show a US label. So that's what you see here. To make changes in general to label settings and the way it's displayed, go to the Edit Label button. And here's where you will see a lot of those changes that I just talked about. In this General tab, we have these general settings. The country authority, again, allows you to select which country labels you'll be creating. Regulation refers to within that country if there are multiple labeling options or sets of regulations, such as the old and the new US label sets. And then for some, you will see a few additional. The recommendation profile for some countries allows us to select the age group that we're working with. Again, the style will have our standard tabular linear, and dual column has been relocated to this area. And then display type, we have the full and simplified. So as you're moving through these settings or options may change as you move from one country to another. I'm going to set mine to Canada, and notice that this applies the Canadian regulations automatically. So in working with the Canadian regulations or country authority, when I move through my Canadian options, then you can see that they apply directly to the Canada settings. So I'll have my recommendation profiles to select from, and then my style. Now we see the newly added standard narrow for Canada. And then under display type, we have simplified single serving prepackaged products. Those are those that have newly added. And again, in general, you'd probably select the most recent regulation. So in the recent versions of the software, you may still have old label formats if you have created recipes prior to the availability of the most recent label. We'd never switch those over for all of your recipes automatically. That wouldn't have been a good idea, as each of your recipes would need to be reviewed to prepare it for the most current set of regulations. So looking at these options, I'm going to switch over to our standard narrow style. So note the width of this label here. When I select the standard narrow, it makes that width just a bit narrower, again, to accommodate product packaging. And then from here, I could choose the different recommendation profiles. So I could switch to the child. I'm on the adult setting now. If I switch to the child 1 to 3 years, not a lot is going to change. Let's view that again. But the percent DVs are the primary thing that will change between the adult and the child label, because there's a different set of recommendations that calculate those percent DVs. But if I do change this to the infant label, then notice that the label itself changes a bit. For infant labels, we don't report fat or saturated fat and trans fat, and we don't report cholesterol. So the software automatically makes those adjustments when you switch to different age profiles. I'll set this back to an adult, and then we'll take a look at the standard and the display type. So the simplified single serving prepackaged products. When I switch to this label, you'll note that it does change quite noticeably. And just to demonstrate this a little better, let me open another copy of this recipe so we can see side by side. So here we have the standard full Canadian label for the same item. And you'll notice a few changes here. Of course, the nutrients are scaled way back, again, based on the omissions of those that don't or that report insignificant amounts. You can see here that we do have calories, fat, carbohydrates, and protein that are required. Notice sodium is appearing because it's occurring at more than 0. So it's being pulled into the label. And again, notice trans fat and saturated fat are on the full label, as well as cholesterol. They appear as 0 amounts, so they're not being reported on the simplified prepackaged label. And while this food does contain potassium and iron, again, it's omitted from the simplified label here. And then again, if I switch this label, from the full standard full to a standard simplified, you can just notice the difference in here. So this is a simplified label, but not the simplified for prepackaged products. And here on this full standard simplified label, you'll have the insignificant footnote and additional information, but that's not occurring on the simplified for prepackaged products. If I do need to show additional information, say again, I'm making a claim for cholesterol and I need to show cholesterol on my label, I can do that. Go to Edit Label and Nutrient Options. Find cholesterol or the nutrient that you need to report, and you'll see the Show option. So in doing that, it brings cholesterol into my label. So if my claim contains no cholesterol or cholesterol free, I report that within my label to back up that claim. And then again here with the style options of the simplified label, I can show a tabular or that horizontal format of this label. And this is in bilingual. Or I can show the linear format, and that will occur as a unilingual label. And again, as I mentioned, those settings, the language settings are true for all tabular and all linear labels. Tabular is set to bilingual and linear is set to unilingual. And another adjustment is that that standard simplified label can also display insignificant nutrients. So if you want to show additional nutrients, just go to the nutrient options and look for the show option for specific nutrients. So that really covers the update changes that we made for this version of Genesis. I'm going to send it back to Chris for a little more information to share.
Thank you, Alicia. So I wanted to cover, in addition to changes to the Genesis program itself, we made some updates to our Genesis API. If you're unfamiliar with APIs, API stands for Application Programming Interface. And an API is just an interface tool that defines interactions between multiple software applications. So in short, it allows integration or data exchange between Genesis R&D and other platforms such as web pages or other business tools that you use. So, I mean, how it works is it is a programmer tool. So a programmer can send a request to a Genesis R&D endpoint and ask for data. That could be, you know, recipe information, nutrition analysis, the fax label itself, and essentially it provides a response with that request. This is done to use to synchronize information in Genesis with your other tools, and it can also automate otherwise manual processes for improved efficiency. Specific changes that we made to the API include the inclusion of all fields and label formats that are in your license. So with the API, you can now define the nutrition fact label module that you want to call upon. So you can say, you know, I want the Canadian label, the US label, etc. You can also define with that tool now the recommendation profiles, the format options, nutrient options, and or the advanced label you want. So prior to this, it was basically based on whatever the label settings you had in Genesis left on, and now we've improved it so you can define that through the call. Update to training. In addition to the webinars that we present here, we also offer formal instruction on the software. The Genesis R&D training classes dive much deeper into working with the software, features and discussion regarding regulations, specific scenarios, and best practices. We offer 2-day professional and 1-day advanced level courses, or combine them into 3-day class options. Typically, training covers the fundamentals of Genesis R&D as well as FDA label creation and regulations. Advanced day builds upon the features and topics covered in the initial 2-day professional class and can be attended as a single-day option if you already have attended the professional level course or feel you have a good handle on that content. We have a training actually next week, the 11th through the 13th. You can see upcoming classes offered in June and July as well. And you will also find additional dates of our upcoming training schedules for later in the year on our website. If your organization needs to arrange training for a group and specific needs, please contact our training department and the email is training@esho.com. At this time, all training sessions are online events, obviously due to the COVID restrictions. So we will, we put this contact us slide into the presentation so that for all people that receive the webinar, as you will after we're done here, that you can reach out and connect to us and stay in touch in a variety of ways. So refer to these contacts to reach out to sales or support or the consulting and training teams. We also invite you to join us at the Esho LinkedIn community, and you can find additional resources, subscribe to our blogs, newsletters, and other content that we produce on the Esho website. With that, we will get to our question and answer session. So question number 1 was, how do I set my Genesis to always create the newest Canadian label?
Sure, I can show you that. Let me jump back into Genesis real quick. And we've talked about my preferences a little bit in previous webinars, but when you're working with the software, from the Home tab, you can go to My Preferences. And in the General tab here, this first set of options here, there's a country authority line. So that allows you to set the basically the default setting or label, the set of country authority. So within this, you can choose US 2016, you could choose Canadian 2016. You'll also see it has the different regulations for those. So if you're wanting to work with the current Canadian label as your kind of default setting when you're moving forward, creating new recipes, choose Canada 26, and that setting will apply to all. Just click OK, and it will change that over. That will not automatically change all of your pre-existing recipes to that Canadian 2016 label format. So just again, be aware moving forward, that would change all of those. And then the My Preferences, again, a general note about that is just that, it's your preferences. So it's not a company-wide setting. If there are multiple Genesis users at your organization, you may want to coordinate your My Preferences settings when it comes to working with your labels so that you know you're all viewing a similar label format there.
Great, thank you, Alicia. And before you get too far, Could you show the customers, we had some people ask how they know which label modules they have.
Of course. So one way you can see it when working with a recipe is when you're in the edit label view and the country authority, when you click on this drop-down menu, you will see the different countries in black text or gray text. My license happens to have all of these modules in active, so I'm seeing black text. If any of this is grayed out, as you might see like this particular text, if any of the country authorities are in gray, then that is not a module that's available under your license at this time. So again, if you need that, contact the sales team.
Great. And next question, how do I show %DV for sugar on my Canadian label?
Sure, let me display the label here. Let's close this one and view this label. So we have a Canadian format. I'm going to set this back to our standard full label. So under the one thing that you'll want to check is under the regulation for Canada, be sure that you have the 2016 option set. So in the older format of the label, the 2003, %DV for sugars was not a requirement on the label. With the 2016 change or update of these label regulations, %DV for sugar was included. So be sure, if you're not seeing %DV for sugars on your Canadian label, be sure that you have that specific regulation selected. Switch from 2003 to 2016, and you should see that on your label. Great question.
Yes, and I think with that great question, we will leave off there from today. Once again, we appreciate everyone for being with us today, and attendees, hopefully you got good information out of this. Also, don't forget, we will send a copy of the recording of the webinar and the slide deck out to everyone, and be following up with any questions we were unable to get to. But if we don't, if you have questions about any of the topics we covered today or about your product, by all means, please feel free to contact us at the resources that we provide in your webinar deck. So thank you once again. With that, we're signing off. Thank you.